In the future, if you want to suggest questions as well as guests to this program, please do find those links in the description to support this independent media work, whether it's Patreon, Substack, or YouTube. But without further ado, let's get started. So actually, I was going to ask this question anyway, but a Patreon member, John, wanted to talk about, and I wanted to begin with this drone, this MQ-9 Reaper drone that the Western mainstream media has said was downed over the Black Sea. A lot of speculation that Russia did that. And Russia has not taken such a direct response to the media about it, although they have, it seems like, obtained some parts of it. What do you make of this development? How significant do you think this is, Scott, given past conversations we've had about the dangers of confrontation between Russia and the United States, Russia and NATO over this conflict in Ukraine? What were your reactions to this, and what should we know about it?
Well, I think it's, first of all, you got to put it in its proper perspective. This is not the case of an innocent American drone flying peacefully over the Black Sea, enjoying the sights of Crimea, being attacked by the brutally aggressive Russians who, sought to, bring it down to fulfill their need for aggression. The United States is an active participant in the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Now, I'm not making a judgment. I'm stating fact. And so if you're somebody who says, yeah, we should be, okay, own it. That's all I'm asking. Own it. Okay. We're not a passive partner. We are an active participant in this war. And we do that by a number of ways. We provide financial assistance. We provide military hardware, tens of billions of dollars worth. We provide operational support. That means that we're doing the planning for the Ukrainians. We provide logistical support. That means we help get stuff from point A to point B, and point B sometimes is deep inside Ukraine. And we provide intelligence that not only provides indications and warnings of potential Russian moves down the road, but real-time intelligence that can be used by Ukraine to target Russian personnel and equipment, destroying them, inflicting millions of dollars of damage and thousands of casualties. So if you're an American, remember, we assassinated Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian head of a Quds force, while he was on a diplomatic mission to Baghdad. And we said we did it because not only did he represent this falsified imminent threat, but we were pretty pissed off at him, because when Qasem Soleimani ran the Quds force assistance to the Iraqi resistance of the American occupation of Iraq back in the 2000s, around 600 Americans were killed as a result of that campaign, and we never forgave him for that, ever. So we killed him. So please don't be a hypocrite and be dismissive of the notion that Russia has no right to be upset with the fact that we're providing real-time targeted intelligence to Ukraine that results in the deaths of thousands of Russians. And one of the resources that provides this real-time intelligence collection that is given to the Ukrainians is the MQ-9 Reaper. It's an advanced drone. We've used it extensively in Iraq, in Afghanistan. We use it everywhere in the world. It's part of our drone wars. We can put Hellfire missiles and other advanced munitions on it, so we can gather intelligence, find a target, fire a missile, drop a bomb, kill people. But we also use it to collect intelligence. If you take a look at some of the platforms that we run on it, we run a number of pods. And one of the big ones is our electronic warfare or signals intelligence collection. We collect signals. We're looking for cell phone data. We're looking for encrypted communications. We're looking for radar signatures, things of this nature, all of which are not only collected, but then immediately transmitted through the beauties of satellite linkage to an operational intelligence fusion center that's evaluating this data, collating this data, and if a high-value target is identified, providing that to a Ukrainian asset that can, if necessary, if it's within the range, put steel on target, killing Russians. And we've been doing this for some time. We operate them out of an air base in Romania. We fly them up the Black Sea coast. And We also play games here. You see, it's one thing we're flying in clearly international waters. Sort of at this point in time, Russia's decided not to escalate this conflict by shooting them down. We would shoot them down. I can guarantee you that if somebody was flying an intelligence asset off of the coast of an area where American troops are engaged in combat, and that asset was providing intelligence about American troops that was given to our enemies to target, we would shoot that thing down in a heartbeat. Bam, gone, finished, goodbye, sayonara. But no, we have a double standard, you see. We're going to fly it off the coast, and we're just going to say, no, this is what we do. This is what we do. We're America. We have a global presence. The whole world is our interest, of interest to us, and we're simply doing that which international law says we're allowed to do. Freedom of the airspace, baby. So we're flying this thing in there. Don't mind the little pod underneath the wing. We don't want to talk about what it's doing, because we're allowed to do this. But what the Russians are saying is, some of the most sensitive airspace that we have, and you're flying along the coastline of an active war zone. And we know what you're doing with the intelligence. So the Russians are creating these zones, no-fly zones. They're saying, you can't fly here because what we're doing right now, we don't want that asset flying in this airspace, collected on that, reporting back to them. We don't want that to happen. And we say, well, you can't do that because this is Crimea, and we don't recognize that you have sovereign control of Crimea. We view it as Ukraine. Therefore, it's not your airspace to put a no-fly zone in. You can't do it. Only the Ukrainian government can do that. And since you're not the Ukrainian government, we're flying the drone in there anyways. And they've done that a couple times. And Russia's tired of having their guys die, as anybody would be. So this time, Russia apparently took a pair of Su-27 fighters up there, and they buzzed it. 19 times they flew by. That's not the Russian data. That's our data. Now, why would they fly by 19 times? Because they're sending a sign. Get the hell out of here. When? We don't want you here. 1, 2, 3. When are you going to get the hint? 19 times you didn't get the hint. So now they say they dumped jet fuel on them. I don't know what that means. Sometimes if you're going to use an afterburner, you inject jet fuel into the jet exhaust, and it gives you that extra boost. And so what this could have been is an effort to ignite an afterburner, going up from the drone, and have the jet wash, knock the drone down, and otherwise deviate it. What the Russians didn't do is shoot it down. We would have shot it down. We would have pulled back, fired an air-to-air missile, act of war, bam. What the Russians did is interfere with the flight performance of the aircraft in a way that caused flight instability to occur, like lift deviated off the wings, and it lost control and it crashed. And I don't think Russia's apologized about it. My understanding is that when the United States summoned Anatoly Antonov, the Russian ambassador to the United States, to the State Department to complain, he gave as good as he got. He wasn't going to sit there on receive mode. He got right in their face and said, no. You can't fly that asset off our coast in a time of war, collect intelligence, and send it back to kill Russians. That ain't going to happen anymore. And so I think that's where we're at. The Russians put a marker on the table, and we lost a $32 million aircraft. Fortunately, no lives were lost, but $32 million. But perhaps even more critically, because money doesn't mean much to America. Hell, we gave $150 billion away to the Ukrainians. What's $32 million among friends? The pod underneath it, the intelligence collection pod, may have been one of the most advanced signals intelligence pods used by NATO today, with the best electronics, the best capabilities, the best encryption, the best satellite connectivity. It would give away a whole bunch of information about how we do business. And the Russians may actually have that in their possession right now. So that's strike two against us. But that's what's going on with the drone. What are we going to do about it? The State Department said that we're going to continue. You can't intimidate us. We're America. You can't intimidate us. And yet General Cavoli, the four-star general, commander of U.S. forces in Europe, went, we're a little bit intimidated. Stand down. We're shutting down the MQ-9 Reaper drone flights until we do a review of what our policies are, what we're doing. Because now what? Next time we want to fly this, are we going to put fighter aircraft up to escort the MQ-9? Because I can tell you, the Russians won't blink. They'll say, get out of here. If not, they'll come in, and if you fire, they'll fire. And there's more of them than us. They'll win. And now we're at war with Russia. And I think that's the fundamental question that has to be asked. Is what we're doing with the MQ-9 Reaper off the coast of Crimea worth going to war with Russia? And the answer is a resounding no. especially given the fact that Ukraine is losing the war, is going to lose the war, never win the war. So whatever we're doing right now is not going to change the outcome. And so I think what we're going to see is the United States may fly a face-saving mission that takes us close to the denied airspace, but not in it. We fly by, we wave, we waggle our wings, and we come back and we go home. And we say, okay, that's done. And that's the end of the MQ-9 Reaper operations in the Black Sea for the time being.
Right. Well, there's I think a good follow-up here that another Patreon subscriber, Cultist, he wanted to ask about air power in this war. And I think it's a good segue from this, given that we're talking about the drone. And so for those of you who just came on the stream, if you subscribe on Patreon or Substack or YouTube, you can submit questions to guests like Scott. But I wanted to ask his question, which I think is a good one, about air power generally in this conflict. So I think a lot of folks have been really taking heed to what you've been saying and others, and we've been talking about on this channel about Russia's superiority on the battlefield, their superior weaponry, and how they are not in the tight situation that Ukraine is, despite all the talks about turning the tide on Ukraine's side over the last several months. So, given this, they're asking, do you feel like air power has kind of been neutralized because both sides have pretty adequate anti-air defenses? And do you think that if Russia wanted to, could they just end this war by air by, let's say, airlifting and dropping paratroopers onto the front lines and kind of ambushing Ukraine from behind? Or is Ukraine's capabilities just too adequate for that?
Airborne forces are what I'll call legacy capability. When they were first created, they had a viable mission, but it's always a high risk mission. You take a look at D-Day and the number of C-46, C-47 aircraft that were shot down, and the paratroopers inside who died, glider operations. I mean, it's a high risk thing, heavy casualty thing. The British operation in Arnhem. I think I forget what the name of the jump was, but when we went across the Rhine River, we put a couple divisions across the Rhine River, and what was purely sort of a political jump, but we lost a lot of guys because the Germans shot down some of these aircraft with paratroopers in them, and they die. Today, they get deployed in the Russians would deploy them in probably IL-76 aircraft. You shoot one down, that's a couple hundred dead paratroopers. For what end? Because when you drop a paratrooper, what do the Russians do some things we don't do in terms of dropping armor support, light armor support. But, the day of the paratrooper is a meaningful impact on the battlefield is probably over. We could drop, we dropped them on Grenada. Yay, 82nd Airborne landed on Grenada. That was a tough one, guys. We dropped them in Iraq. The 173rd jumped in to Kurdistan, again, non-contested battle. But there hasn't been a contested airborne assault for a long time. I think Korea might have been the last one for the United States. Israel may have done something in the Sinai. But I'm trying to think. It's just not a good way of doing business, but we do it because of the esprit de corps. We do it because it's a leadership school. We do it because jumping out of airplanes with a parachute is cool. But the idea that the Russians are going to sacrifice hundreds or thousands of paratroopers to parachute behind enemy lines is absurd. I think that the best thing that could happen with paratroopers is they'd be rather than jumping in, that the Russians would seize an airfield and land the aircraft there. But even then, you need all the air defense shot down, and that's tough in the modern day. All it takes is one missile, shoot down an airplane. So I don't think you're going to see airborne forces deployed in that nature. On air power itself, the Russians just have a completely different approach to air power than the United States. They have traditionally, when it comes to battlefield fire support, relied on artillery and missiles, long-range missiles, short-range missiles, intermediate-range missiles. The Scud was a battlefield support missile. The Frog, free rocket over ground, was a battlefield support missile. The Iskander today, the Tochka-U was an old one. Now we can go on and on. This is what they do. Well, we don't have that. We don't have the equivalent. We got HIMARS. That's a multiple launch rocket system. It has ATACMS. It has some capability, but by and large, what we do is we have artillery, limited rockets, air. We got a lot of air. We use helicopters. We use a lot of helicopters. We use a lot of close air support. The A-10 was a big deal for a while. The F-16 has an air-to-ground delivery capability. F-18 does it for the Marine Corps. And so that's what we do. We call in close air support. Again, that's a legacy operation. That's something that came out of the Second World War, and then we've developed it ever since. But ever since the Second World War, we've never really operated in an environment that was prohibitive in terms of close air support. During Desert Storm, when we had air supremacy, everybody talked about, well, most of our A-10s were lost near the end of the war when we were trying to provide close air support to the advancing troops, and the Iraqis were able to shoot it down using, man-portable air defense systems. So the A-10 isn't invincible. It can be shot down. The OV-10 aircraft I used to fly, the Bronco, was an observer aircraft, but it got over the Iraqi battlefield. It got shot down. F-16s get shot down when they go over the battlefield. This is what happened. This is against Iraq that had limited air defense capabilities. Now you want to bring the U.S. Air Force up against the most sophisticated, dense integrated air defense network the world has ever seen, which is what the Russians are bringing to bear. It's a different game. And the Russians are the same way. They don't do close air support like we do. They do it. Don't get me wrong. But for instance, what we want is precision strike. We want eyes on target or sensor on target. And we're going to, release the ordnance directly on the target. If you take a look what the Russians are doing, they have this whole air delivery mechanism where the planes come in low, then they arch up and they loft their rockets in and strike. But they have a very good onboard computer that tells the pilot when the loft. He takes a look, he lofts at a particular angle, and when that icon hits where it needs to hit, he fires, and they're hitting the target. Ask the Ukrainians when the missiles come in, they're hitting the target. But if you have to get line of sight where you have to come in and shoot, and you need to see something to put the wire guided missile on there, or the TV guided missile, or the IR guided missile. Problem is, if you can see the target can see you. And if the target can see you, that means somebody with a surface to air missile can see you. And as you're coming in, you're at a point of vulnerability now because they're going to fire, and you got to get away, and it just becomes a game that more often than not you lose. So the Russians aren't big on our style of close air support. They do close air support, but again, they do it in a different manner. The same thing with their helicopters. They come in, they do the loft. They don't do, we like to have our Apaches hover over and fire hellfire straight at the target that can be seen by the pilot. But if you're doing that against a Russian-style air defense, you're going to get shot down. So what we're seeing right now is, everybody's a little bit risk averse. Nobody likes to lose a lot of aircraft. Ask the Ukrainians, because they've lost just about their entire air force, having a tough time. Pilots that are left though are pretty good pilots. I mean, the fact that the Ukrainian Air Force is still out there flying sorties every day is an indication that they have some good pilots. But this is a different kind of war. It's not Vietnam. If you look at Afghanistan, if it wasn't for the U.S. Air Force coming in, we'd have a lot more dead special forces guys, those thick-armed, thick-necked guys that run around thinking they won the whole war by themselves. A lot of them be dead if they didn't have close air support come in and save them from the Taliban. Think about it. A sophisticated military world ambushed by a bunch of, villagers, sheep herders. Of course, Taliban's sophisticated, but, still ambushed, and they're going to die. The Taliban's going to win if close air support doesn't come in and neutralize the target. Same thing in Iraq. So, we're addicted to a resource, to an asset that may work in Iraq and in Afghanistan when you have no high threat levels, but isn't going to work in a place like Ukraine. So that's why I think you don't see air power as much. But look at what the Russians are doing. They're adapting. What they're doing right now, they brought in something called the FAB. It's a air-delivered bomb, big bomb. and they got it 500 kilogram, 1,000. I think it goes up to even bigger than that. But they're dropping it now. It has wings and a guidance system, so it's not as sophisticated as ours, but they drop it, and it can be dropped from a long distance outside of the envelope of Ukrainian air defense, and then guided in and hit the target. You're starting to see them use it in Bakhmut more and more to break the back of the Ukrainian defenses. So air power is being deployed, but it's done in a more standoff fashion because the Russians don't want to risk going in. Now, that doesn't mean they can't, but understand that requires a whole new aerial campaign. You have to come in and you have to have a suppression of enemy air defense campaign, which brings in, we used to call them wild weasels, our aircraft to come in and generate, hit the enemy to fire up their radars and then shoot anti-radar missiles at them, take out air defense so the other planes can come in. We would have to run a campaign like that if we were going to bring in our air, and Russia would have to run a campaign like that. And right now, I think Russia's looking at it saying there's no need for us to do that. There's not a target we can't hit in Ukraine using methodology that doesn't involve us losing aircraft at high numbers.